So I guess then everything today is racist. The end. Hi, my name is Sydney, welcome back to my channel. Now, all of us know that university campuses are a breeding ground for stupids. And I would know, seeing as I went to one for absolutely way too long. It was awful. I wouldn't recommend it. And weirdly enough, despite the fact that campuses try so hard to eliminate racism, for some reason they've inadvertently become breeding grounds for it. But recently, this video was taken at the University of Virginia, and unsurprisingly, it resulted in a lot of backlash.
Public service announcement. Excuse me. If y'all didn't know, this is the MSC, and frankly, there's just too many white people in here, and this is a space for people of color. So just be really cognizant of the space that you're taking up, because it does make some of us POCs uncomfortable when we see too many white people in here. It's only been open for 4 days, and frankly, there's the whole university for a lot of y'all to be at, and there's very few spaces for us. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
And then everyone clapped. But literally. The part of this that actually made me the most mad was the smugness on her face when she sat down. Just look at it. Look at that hair flip. Maybe it's Maybelline. Maybe it's overt racism. Obviously, videos like this get a lot of traction from both sides. On one hand, there are people who absolutely support this kind of message because they actually believe that the white population kind of just need to vacate life in general. On the other hand, there are people who are very quick to point out the hypocrisy of this subject overall. Because the fact is, had this been a white student telling black students to leave, the university probably would have burned down. It's kind of like the equivalent of being on Oprah, except that rather than getting gifts, you just get a riot. You get a riot, you get a riot. What's interesting to me about this clip is it highlights the full 360 that some people have done when it comes to the issue of racial segregation. If it wasn't clear, apparently it's fine now. Across the globe, segregation has been widely criticized and continues to be criticized today, as the majority of people view it as a serious cultural injustice. So observing its self-imposed resurgence is leaving a lot of us feeling very confused. Because segregation is bad. Well, yes, but actually no. The idea of separating white and black students, or in the very least banning white students from particular college community spaces, is not new. Universities across the Western world have barred white students from clubs, events, dorms, rec spaces, and even workout areas. In 2015, a British university students' union banned white people and men from an event to promote equality. Ah yes, nothing says equality quite like banning people. In 2016, students at Claremont colleges refused to live with white people. One student said that people of color are allowed to create safe POC-only spaces. It is not reverse racism or discriminatory, it is self-preservation. Self-preservation from what? White guys who think ketchup is spicy? I know, more your overall inability to dance. Other examples include a private college in California hosting a non-whites allowed pool party. Another American university created a cafe as a sanctuary for non-whites. A college in Washington hosted a No White People Day. This college was especially thoughtful because they even had anti-racist workshops available for all white folks and people who do not identify as POC. Oh, thank you, because without that, I guess none of us would know not to keep slaying. Sydney, don't say what I think you're gonna say. Say what? I was going to talk about slaying discrimination. Why are you such a racist? But overall, self-segregation seems to be socially acceptable and in a lot of cases pretty well received. But like most things, this is not a new concept. As it turns out, black separatism and black nationalism are two fairly similar ideas that cropped up in response to white racism. Both concepts more or less refer to forming separate institutions or even a separate nation for black people. A leading example of a black nationalist group is the Nation of Islam, led by Louis Farrakhan, who has continued to espouse the group's core belief that white people are inherently evil and that they're blue-eyed devils. Well, really, the joke's on you guys, cause my eyes are brown. You see, the demonic devil bit comes from me being a female. not from being white. Now, obviously, many of these black nationalists and black separatist groups are on the extreme end of things, but there is absolutely no shortage of them, and I thoroughly enjoy how these hate groups are conveniently left out of any and all discussion about supremacy in the United States. Interestingly, a few celebrated historical black leaders have more or less agreed with some of these ideas in one way or another. For example, in 1963, Malcolm X gave a speech at the University of California, Berkeley, in which he outlined the philosophy of black nationalism as promoted by the Nation of Islam, and declared racial separatism as the best approach to the problems facing black America. Which feels like a very far cry from the words of Martin Luther King Jr., who gave a speech in the same year asking us to judge people based on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. So yeah, there's that. Now, in trying to explain this self-imposed segregation, researchers and writers seem to all end up at the same conclusion. It is a response to white racism and the behavior of white people. So far, if you've been keeping up, we're apparently responsible for racism and climate change and slavery and war and Donald Trump.
Wrong.
Proved over and over again.
But frankly, this conclusion isn't really all that surprising, considering that the majority of black Americans feel they've experienced racism or discrimination, they view being black as central to their identity, and they feel that they are treated unfairly in a range of institutional settings. Now, self-segregation happens all over, in neighborhoods, on college campuses, in friendships, in the workplace, and so on. In fact, a concept called the black self-segregation hypothesis attempts to explain why black people prefer to live in black-only communities. And while we know that this is caused in part because of racial income differences, racial prejudice, and housing market discrimination, other researchers have suggested that America's housing segregation for most middle-class Afro-Americans is largely a voluntary phenomenon. When it comes to housing, it's not to say that racism and discrimination don't play a part, but they certainly don't make up the whole picture. I don't know why researchers spend so much time trying to answer these questions. I can answer it for you. Everyone's just a giant jerk. But neighborhoods aren't the only area where self-segregation takes place. Like the education system, for example, which is an issue unto itself that we aren't discussing in this video because there are too many factors and not enough time. So, sorry about that. However, I did find one really interesting study that says that the preference for racial homogeny starts at school. The researchers found that black kids who self-segregate, who only hang out with other blacks, are more popular than black kids who have white friends. And then they grow up to be this kid. Yes, smug, lumpy, mean lady. For the white students, on the other hand, self-segregating actually hurts their popularity. And in the end, the research concluded that black children are rewarded socially for avoiding white kids. Now, it's entirely possible that this perception and behavior bleeds into adulthood and everyday life.
We're just gonna intellectually denigrate and scold you for the abuse of your white privilege.
Now, in an effort to prove how racist white people are, several people wrote about the results of a survey on American values by the Public Religion Research Institute. It found that fully 3/4, 75%, of white Americans report that the network of people with whom they discuss important matters is entirely white, with no minority presence. That one's easy to explain. We all like to sit together and reflect the sun. But jokes aside, this actually makes sense to me, because at least 62% of the American population is white, and there are states with up to a 94% white population. So realistically, those people probably never come into contact with someone who isn't pasty, who can dance, who doesn't think ketchup is spicy. You see, they live in cabins in the wilderness with no human contact, and the only other person that they see on the reg is their white neighbor Tony, who brings them horse meat or something. Why are you like this? On the other hand, approximately 2/3, or 65%, of black Americans report having a core social network that is composed entirely of people who are also black. Given that black Americans make up just under 13% of the population, this kind of surprised me, because I figured that they would have, more white people around them and a greater opportunity of befriending us. Listen, being friends with us white people is actually fine. We have a rich culture of never wearing enough sunscreen and saying things like Zumba is fun. Now, despite the fact that I really couldn't find a wide range of research into why people self-segregate, one reason that is very clear is it is a response to the perceived need for self-preservation when it comes to racism.
White people are racist. No, you're always going to be racist, actually.
The bottom line here is that segregationists from the 60s would be getting a really good chuckle about how we're allowing and even encouraging segregation to happen all over again. Stop that. All of this separating and labeling based on race is one of the biggest contributing factors in the division in America today. And sure, it makes for a great foundation for race baiters, the media, and politicians, but it's not so great for the overall general population. Part of my problem with almost all of this is the fact that so many of these communities are completely unable to practice what they preach. College campuses want to eliminate racism with anti-white racism. They want to promote equality with inequality. They want white people to be friends with minorities, when it actually kind of seems like minorities really aren't all that interested in that, but kick white people out of the room at every opportunity. Real talk, how are we supposed to participate at the table when we aren't even allowed to take a seat? What these people don't realize is that the more that they break down groups into smaller and smaller minority subsets, all of whom have different rights and are placed within the hierarchy of oppression and victimhood, the harder it becomes to propagate ideas like equality and anti-racism. Because there's always a series of caveats to explain why racism or oppression or what have you is okay in one context against one group of people and not another. And as it stands, it seems that there will always be a justification for why racism against white people is okay and how it doesn't actually even register as racism. In the end, if people want to exacerbate the racial divide, then self-segregation is absolutely the way to do it. Now I open the floor to you. What do you all think? Is self-segregation necessary? Does it actually help anything? Do people even have the right to self-segregate? And what do you generally make of this issue overall? As always, if you like the video, hit subscribe and the thumbs up button. If you want to leave a comment, feel free to do so. Just be respectful about it. And I will see you guys next time.